Welcome to another episode of Unscripted. I'm your host, Kelly Cardenas, and think of these words right here. Love, faithfulness, insight, wisdom, discernment, graciousness, prudence, patience, self-control, and commitment. Imagine if we just sat in those words for a couple seconds. And I'll say it again. Love, faithfulness, insight, prudence, patience, self-control, commitment. When we look at those words, it would cause us to slow down, for us to enjoy that moment, enjoy the fact that God made us exactly perfect for the exact right moment where we're at, and that if he needed us someplace else, he would have us there. Well, this journey through Proverbs has been incredible. The corresponding proverb, the corresponding day, 3,000-year-old wisdom that is applicable more than ever in our relationships, our business, and our life, and especially in our leadership culture and systems. Proverbs 16, unscripted. Let's get it.
Cause we believin', it's for certain. We put the work in. We ain't stopped just because it's hurting. Right before your eyes, so it's coming to no surprise. The takeover is televised. Over and over and over again. Make no mistake, we continue to win. Defeat never known, cause I will not lose. They wanna mimic my moves, but can't walk in my shoes.
Station identification, Proverbs 16, unscripted. If you haven't subscribed to the channel on YouTube, go ahead and click that link. On Spotify, too, I need your love. Go ahead and download the episode. If you're listening on Apple, I want to thank you. I want to thank all of you for helping the podcast to get in the top 1% globally. And I want to thank our sponsors, Mr. Chris Noggle with Private Money Club and Money School, and Mr. Jim DiGiulio with Volvo Cars of Las Vegas, Finley Volvo Cars of Las Vegas. It helped me to realize that it wasn't about the transactions that I did, but the relationships that would last a lifetime. So what I want to encourage you to do, too, is to comment. Send in comments and questions. I have questions on these things. And as I go through and as I study them, I find that it again starts to read me more. I invite you to follow through in the book of Proverbs, whatever Bible you have. And again, this is not from a religious standpoint. This is from a relationship standpoint. Make sure that you get in the Word, and the Word will start translating to exactly where you are at. Read it out loud. Just read one page a day, or just one proverb a day. The corresponding proverb, corresponding day, 3,000-year-old wisdom that comes from God, which is incredible. So let's jump right in. The words that we're going to cover today, and Proverbs 16 will cover, is love, faithfulness, insight, wisdom, discernment, graciousness, prudence, patience, self-control, and commitment. And the things that it's going to combat, what I found, was worry, anxiety, and stress. Worry, anxiety, and stress. And we all go through them, whether it be personally, professionally, spiritually, or financially. I find myself in these places where the worry will take my focus off of God. The anxiety take my focus off God. And the stress take my focus off God. And all he wants is our attention. And so let's jump right in. Point number one is God's will. And this one is amazing because it's in verse 1 through 6. I'll read this. To humans belong the plans of the heart, but from the Lord comes the proper answer of the tongue. All a person's ways seem pure to them, but the motives are weighed by the Lord. Commit to the Lord whatever you do, and he will establish your plans. The Lord works out everything in its proper end even the wicked for the day of disaster. The Lord detests all the proud of heart. Be sure of this, they will not go unpunished. Verse 6, through love and faithfulness, sin is atoned for. Through the fear of the Lord, evil is avoided. And so what I wrote down in this is God's will. Like, think of this. There's three parts to it. God's will, God's plan, and then God's timing. Now, God's will is generally not in line with our will. God's plan, it definitely doesn't turn out the way that we think it's going to. And I can tell you this from a business standpoint, from a personal standpoint, there is no way that I could have wrote out my life and said, hey, I'm going to do this. And it's people will say, you know, if you just write out the plan, you just work the plan all the time. But there's going to be hiccups. There's going to be life. And that's the thing that all of us are playing in. And that's where when I say sometimes, 99.99999% of the time, the challenges are going to happen is that we're going to be at odds with the plan because we think that the plan should go this certain way. But imagine this. It's God's will. It's God's plan. It's God's timing. And I wrote down here, when I was reading this, I wrote down Mike Tyson because Mike Tyson said, we all have a plan until we get punched in the mouth. And the way that we get punched in the mouth is through life. How many of us have ever had the perfect wedding, the perfect, storybook marriage or life or financial situation, and then bang, something happens and we think, oh my gosh, I got hit out of left field. Guys, that's just the way that life goes. And I know this growing up as a kid that lived in, probably 12 or 13 different residences, didn't live in the same house for more than 3 years. Constantly on the move, didn't put up posters in my room because I didn't know when we were going to actually leave. But the one thing that I did know was that all the prayers that my mom and my pops had for me helped me to realize that it was not my will, it was God's. It was not my plan, it was God's. And it was not my timing, which was the most challenging. But we all have a plan until we get punched in the mouth. And that's in verse 9 and verse 11 and verse 32 and verse 1 through 6. So check that out. Point number 2 is I wrote money in the bank, and this comes from verse number 7. Verse number 7, it says, when the Lord takes pleasure in anyone's way, he causes their enemies to make peace with them. Imagine if your enemies, imagine if all the people, the challenging people, and I tell you, probably one of the hardest places ever to be able to put the podcast has been YouTube. I've got more nasty comments on YouTube than anything ever. But what I realize is that my enemies will make peace if I simply give it up to God's will, God's plan, and God's timing. So in verse 7, when God is on your side, and I put ... when God's on your side, there's no one that can stand against you. There's no plan. There's no nothing. There's no insight. There's no wisdom that could stand against his will. So the cool thing is all we have to do, I used to feel this way protected because I had 2 big brothers and especially a big brother named Rob. And if I had a challenge, I'd just run to Rob. Imagine you could do that to God. You could run to him and make sure that you're in line with his will. How do we get in line with his will? We just fear him. We respect him. And when we respect him, he gives us wisdom. And that wisdom will help us to understand knowledge, and it will give us understanding. It'll give us insight. It'll give us discernment. It'll give us discipline. It'll give us strength, and it'll take us right back to the fear of him or the respect of him. And then that way we're giving it up to his will. And then with his will moving, then he's going to work the plan, and we're going to walk right through it. And then you know what? It's going to be on his timing. Always his timing. Point number 3 is do the right thing for the right reasons, and the right things will happen. Now, imagine this. There is no rule against that. Doing the right thing for the right reasons, and the right thing happens. Now, there's time we do the right thing for the wrong reasons. I've done it. Maybe I'm the only one. But imagine this, when we do the right thing for the right reasons. How do we know it's the right reason? Because we've stayed in communication with God. We've stayed in presence with him. And we've had a relationship, not a religion, not a ritual trying to get to him. I'm going to do this and do this and do this, God. No, he said that he doesn't care as much about the sacrifice that you do as opposed to the prayers. It's a heart condition. Do the right things for the right reasons, and the right things will happen. This comes in verse 8. In verse 8, better little with righteousness than much gain with injustice. Big hat, no cattle, right? And we go back to that and we look at it. And then in verse 19, let's see here. Actually, it's on this page here. So in verse 19 and in verse 25. So in verse 19, better to be lowly in spirit along with the oppressed than to share the plunder with the proud. In verse 25, it says, there is a way that appears to be right, but in the end, it leads to death. Think of that. How many times have you ever tried to justify? Like, when I say you, me, when have I ever tried to justify? Yeah, I know exactly the right thing to do, and I know the right reasons, but I'm like, you know what? Let me try and convince myself. Let me call 5 friends. Let me phone a friend that will tell me something else. So think of this is do the right things for the right reasons. The right things will turn out. So the point number 4, get wisdom at all costs. This comes from verse 16. In verse 16, how much better to get wisdom than gold, to get insight rather than silver. It's saying that wisdom is more important than gold. And gold is the standard. Gold's still the standard today. Some of you out there are like, no, it's Bitcoin. But then put Bitcoin in that. Let's see. Better to be lowly in spirit. Let's see. Verse 16. How much better to get wisdom than Bitcoin? To get insight rather than Ethereum. You could put whatever the gold standard is for you, but imagine this. Imagine if we just seek out wisdom, and wisdom will bring everything anyway. Point number 5 is pride goes before destruction. This is probably one of the hardest ones because I have a ton of pride and I have the tendency to let my ego get involved, and especially when I'm communicating with people, not listening to their side or hearing their perception or perspective, but just wanting to force in mine. This has happened to me over and over again, but it says in verse 18, pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall. And think of this, before you go into something, slow down, take a breath, and realize that it's God's will, it's God's plan, and it's got to be on his timing. Point number 6, trust in God's plan. Trust in God's plan, trust in God's plan, trust in God's plan. Verse 20, whoever gives heed to instruction prospers, and blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord. Guys, it's right there. Point number 7 is prudence. Verse number 22, prudence is a fountain of life to the prudent, but folly brings punishment to the fools. I love verses like this because it just says exactly what it means. Prudence is the fountain of life to the prudent, but folly brings punishment to fools. Point number 8 is encourage others. Do this as often as possible. Lift people up. Speak life to them. Speak as much life as you can and make sure that it's got their name, it's got specific things, and encourage someone today. Text message, call, email, whatever it is. When you start encouraging people around you, they start performing at a completely different level. That's in verse 23. 23 and 24, it says, the hearts of the wise make their mouths prudent and their lips promote instruction. Gracious words are a honeycomb, sweet to the soul and healing to the bones. If you want to heal the bones, you want to heal your friends, you want to heal the people around you, your family, encourage them. Encourage them. I don't believe that anyone will ever get spoiled from true encouragement. Point number 9, as we finish up here, is self-control. I wrote, pump the brakes. I have to do this. My brother tells me all the time. I get on the phone with him. I have 50 different ideas, one a day. I have the $1 trillion idea. I have the $1 million idea. I have the $1 billion idea. And he's like, pump the brakes and have the dollar idea. Start with right now, what you have, use your gifts, and stop chasing the rabbit. Stop chasing the shiny things. Have self-control. Just because you could do it doesn't make it your purpose. Watch this. In verse 32, this is my favorite verse out of the whole entire proverb, although there's a bunch of bombs in here. Better a patient person than a warrior, one with self-control than one who takes a city. Pump the brakes, pump the brakes, pump the brakes. As we finish up with Proverbs 16, it's very simple. It's God's will, God's plan, God's timing. Imagine this. Imagine if you just said, you sat down, you said, I'm going to seek him. I'm going to listen to his wisdom. I'm going to act on his instruction, or I'm going to await on his instruction, and I'm going to act in his peace. Let me say it again, and I'll slow it down. Seek him. Listen to his wisdom. Wait on his instruction and act in his peace. When will that peace come? When you simply commune with him and you get to a point where you realize, and this is a tough thing, even at the ripe old age of 48, the challenging thing is I know I can make all the plans in the world. I can try and will things into be. I could try and work on my time frame. But when I realize that it's God's will, that it's God's plan, and it's God's timing, I have the tendency to rest back and realize that I'm exactly where I need to be at the exact right time. And if God needed me there, he would have me there. He's big enough. Thank you so much for tuning in for another episode of Unscripted, Proverbs 16. I appreciate you. Make sure that you click the links, that you check out our sponsors, and that you subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, on Apple, and please on YouTube, because my son thinks I'm cooler. I have had an incredible morning with you this morning. Thank you so much for being here. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. I'm officially off the hot seat. Peace, love, and soul.